Unlock the power of databases with this MySQL course for beginners. Whether you're new to databases or looking to level up your skills, this course has you covered. You'll learn how to create, manage, and manipulate data using MySQL. You'll discover the secrets of keys, learn to write queries like a pro, and automate tasks with triggers. No jargon, just practical knowledge. Josh from Keep It Techie teaches this course. He works as a SQL Server database administrator, so he's the perfect person to teach this course.
What's up, guys? It's Josh from Keep It Techie, and welcome to my comprehensive course on MySQL. Now, MySQL is a relational database management system, and in this course, I'll try to explore the ins and outs of MySQL on Rocky Linux, which is a powerful combination for managing your data effectively. Now, MySQL is not just any database. It's the fundamental port of the LAMP stack, which stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And then also the LIMP stack, which is Linux, Nginx, MySQL, and PHP. And these stacks are widely used for content management systems like WordPress, Joomla, and various other web applications. And I'll start with the basics, covering the installation, login procedures, and a little bit of database management. So whether you're a beginner or have some experience, this course will help you master MySQL on this fantastic Linux distribution. So let's head over to Rocky Linux 9 server and get started with the installation process. Okay, so here we are logged into Rocky Linux 9 server. And to install MySQL, we'll follow these simple steps. And I just brought up the OS release information under so you guys can see that I am on Rocky Linux 9, which is a one-to-one comparison to Red Hat 9. So let's go down and clear. And first, let's ensure that our system is up to date. And we need to run the following command to refresh the package repositories and apply any available updates. And that command is sudo dnf and update. And we'll wait for this to finish, but this will basically check to see if there's any updates. And if there are, it'll upgrade those packages on the server. And as you can see, we don't have any updates, so we're good to go. I believe I updated this before I started this video. So now to install MySQL, all we have to do is type sudo dnf install and then MySQL server, and I'll just tab it out. It'll pull up the latest version of MySQL. So that's basically the version number and all that stuff for this actual package. So let's go down and press enter. That'll go through and resolve all the dependencies for MySQL as well as the package for MySQL. So all we have to do is type Y for yes. We want to install this package and use the amount of space that it will use on the operating system. So let's go down and press enter. It'll go through, like I said, download all those dependencies as well as the MySQL server package and then install it on the system. So I'll be back when it finishes. All right, so the installation is complete and now we need to check the MySQL services status, and we can do that by using the systemctl command. So let's type sudo systemctl, and one thing I noticed on Rocky Linux, it doesn't start the service after the installation or a port of the installation process. Similar to like Ubuntu, typically when you install MySQL, it'll go down and start the service. And you may have to go in and enable the service, but most of the time it starts the service right off. But on Rocky Linux or RHEL, it doesn't. So systemctl and then status. And then what we want to do is check that MySQL status, and you'll see that it's not started. Boom. And it'll say right here where it says active, it says inactive. So right now that lets you know that it's not started. And then also the enabled portion of it, this is essentially for when you reboot the server itself, that service will store it up. Right now it's disabled. We want to enable that. So it's two commands we can run right fast. We basically have to run the sudo systemctl start, and this will start the actual service. So let's go and press enter. All right, and so we can run the status command again, and this will show you that that service is running now. So as you can see, it says active and running, but we still need to enable it. So let's go down and press Q. That'll drop us back down to the terminal again, and we can up arrow, and then let's remove the status and type type enable, press enter, and I'll go through and enable this service. So each time you reboot your Rocky Linux server, MySQL will store it. And so let's check the status again. We can go back in here and look at it. And this is what we're looking for, where it says enabled. That lets you know it's enabled, so that service is stored up. And so that's pretty much it. We've successfully installed MySQL. And now it's time to show you guys how to log into it. And you use a command called MySQL. And you also want to put the user account. And if there is a password, then you want to put that password there as well, or the option to ask for a password. But since it's root account that's on the system, on the default root account, it doesn't have a password, you can log right in. And so let me go down and type the command in, and we are using a sudo account, so we have to type sudo in order to run the MySQL command. So let's type sudo MySQL, and then we need to put our user, so we have to put our option in there -u, and then the username. So I'm gonna use that root account. Like I said, that's the default account that's there after installation, and it doesn't have a password on there, but we need to put -p at the end of it, so it will ask us for the password. And you'll see once we get past this step, it'll ask for the password, but we don't have to put a password in because there is no password set for it. Now, I wanted to point this out to you as well, though. You want to make sure you follow best practices and create a dedicated user account for your projects. You don't want to be using this root account with no password on it. So let's go down and press enter. It'll ask you for a password. It says enter password. And since we ran sudo, it normally will ask you for a sudo account. So if you may see it asking for the sudo account. So you want to type that in, of course, but then it'll pop up with this enter password for the MySQL account. So I just want to let you guys know that the way you're seeing it on mine, it may not show up on yours. You may have to type in a password for sudo and then press enter, because there is no password. So let's press enter right fast, and that'll get us into our MySQL server. Now that we're in, let's explore some basic MySQL commands and functionality. Now, once you're inside the MySQL prompt, which is what it's showing right here with the MySQL and then that right arrow, you can begin executing commands. And so let me walk you guys through a few ones. The first one you need to know is the help command. So if we type help, and then pretty much every command, you have to type a semicolon behind it, similar to typing out a query, in order for it to run that statement for you. So help will basically give you a whole bunch of information on how to use MySQL. If you scroll through here, you'll see a list of all MySQL commands, and some of these commands, they use that left slash in front of it. And that's what I was going to show you guys as well after this. By typing help, as one word and then a semicolon, there's another way of actually getting to the help, and that's the backslash and H. But the other ones are there, and they have an explanation of what they actually do. And I won't go through them all because I typically don't use a lot of these commands, these MySQL commands right here, but I just wanted to show you guys where to get that information from if you need it. Now let me go down and run that backslash and then H, and that way you guys can look at the same thing. And it looks like it didn't change because it just basically ran it again and displayed the same information. So we are good to go. Now the first thing I wanted to show you guys is how to find databases within your database management system. And so I'll show you guys that command now, and it's essentially the show command. So all we have to do is type show, and then we want to type what we're looking for, which is databases. So databases with an S and then semicolon at the end of it. And this will show you all the databases that are currently on the system. So let's go down and press enter. And what you'll see is some built-in databases for the database management system, like information schema, like the performance schema, this MySQL database, as well as the sys database. And I recommend you don't touch any of those. Those are vital to the system running properly. But this is how you actually look at all the databases that are on the system. All right, so now that we know how to look at the databases that are currently on the system, I wanted to show you guys how to create a database, because this is like one of the most important steps after that, because we need to understand how to create those databases. So all we have to do is type create, and a lot of these commands, you'll start remembering them almost like a sentence, because that's essentially what it is. Like show databases, simple, create database. So we want to create a database, and that's the command right there. So create database with no S, because it's singular. so no S is needed. And then the database name. So we can name it whatever we want to. I'm gonna just do DB name and then put a semicolon at the end of it and go down and press, and that'll create our database. As you can see, query okay, one row affected. So, and what row they're talking about is the built-in table that lists out all the databases that are in the database management system. So we can go back and look at that show databases command, and we'll see that that new database is there. It's called DB name. That's what we named it. Now, probably the next question you have is, how do I create tables within the database that we just created? And I need to show you another command beforehand, and you need to specify the database you want to run queries against by using the use command. So like I said, almost like a sentence, you just type use, and we want to use a specific database, and which database we want to use is that DB name. And then you can end out your sentence with the semicolon and press enter, and this will make a change so that we are using database name for the following commands. And you need to do that every single time, so MySQL will know what database you're creating things with, or even running other queries like select or update. It needs to know what database it's working with. So you have to use this command in order to change it to the database that you want to work with. And now I want to show you guys how to create a table. And then, like I said, it's almost like a sentence. So create table. And then we want to create a table name. So we have to name that table. So I'm gonna just name it employees. Now this is a little bit more complicated because it requires multiple lines. So after this, we have to specify each one of the columns within that table. And you can press enter in here. And that's why it's important to understand the purpose of that semicolon. That closes out your query. Until you type that semicolon, it will not close out the query. So let's go down and press enter, boom. And as you can see, it'll go to the next line, allowing you to type some more information. And we want to go through and create each one of the columns within our database. And so the first one is employee underscore ID. A lot of times when you create a table, you want to create what they call a primary key. And this is a unique identifier for each row of data within the database. And that just keeps things a little bit more cleaner in the database, as well as a way to make sure we don't have any duplicate information. And if the information is duplicate in other columns, it will still recognize it as a different record. So the next thing we want to use is integer. So this is an integer, meaning a number. So, and then also with our primary key, there's an option you can put here called auto increment, and this will allow it to create numbers in sequence. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it will, keep going as new records are added to the database or to the table. And so let's type that in right fast. So auto underscore increment. And then also this is a primary, so we have to type that out as well. And then we have to put a comma at the end of it. That'll let us know that that is one of the columns within our table. And then we can press enter and we can type in our next column. And let's start off with first name. And just like the init, we have to specify what type of characters are in it. The init is integer. Like I said, that's a number. Well, this is a variable, all those letters. And so we have to type var char, and then we can specify the amount of characters that you can type within that. And so the default is like 255. You'll see a lot of people put 255. So that's a good length for the amount of characters that can be put into it. And then we can also specify that this column should always have information in it. You can't create another row unless information is in that field within that column. So let's go type not null, and that's what that means. Null meaning not empty or blank. And so we can type a comma at the end of it. And let's go on and type in our next column, which I'll go with last underscore name. And then same thing, so var char, and then 255. And we can close that out, and then not null as well for that one. Hit a comma, and let's do one more, and that'll be the birth date of our employee. So that's just some information we want to put in there for this table, or require for this table. And then we could put dates, and then we could leave it not null off because we don't need the birthday. I'm just showing you guys that. And then once it's the last one, you don't have to put a comma at the end of it, but we do have to press enter and close out these parentheses. If you open a parentheses, you need to close it. So let's go down and close it right fast. And then what is the last thing? I'm sure you guys remember, but is the semicolon that will close out your query. And so all of this information here, it will create each one of the columns within that table. So it'll create the table and then it'll create all the columns within that table here. So let's go down and press enter. And as long as you see query OK, 0 rows affected, that means it successfully created that table. And so now we have that employees table within the database. We could check the structure of it to verify that we typed it in correctly by using the describe command. So let's go down and type describe and then our table. So it is the employees table. And of course, at the end of each statement, you have to put that semicolon at the end of it. And this will give you information about this table. So as you can see, the fields, we got our fields, our different columns within the table, and we got employee ID, then this integer, and then null, and then this is the primary key, and then also this is auto increment. You'll see that listed there, and this will break down basically the structure of this table. So this is what that describe is for. Now, I won't go into adding data yet, but I'll show you guys how to drop this table. And with MySQL, or with SQL, the actual language that we're using, drop is actually how you delete something within the database. So let's say we want to drop that employees table that we just created. So all we have to do is type drop, and then we want to specify that we want to drop a table and then the table name. So like I said, employees, and then type a semicolon at the end, and this will drop that table. And I forgot, before I drop that table, I wanted to show you guys something else. So I'm gonna just press up arrow and find that create table, employees table, and I'm gonna bring it back right fast. So let's press enter. And of course, that's one way of showing you guys. You could type this out without the separate lines. It's just easier to see if you put it on a separate line. You see what I'm saying? But you could type it out just like that, the way it's listed there. So I wanted to show you guys the show tables command, and let's go down and type that in. So show tables. And like I said, we're still using that DB name database. And so let's go down and press enter, boom, and that will show you the actual table that's there. And now let's go back and remove that table. I'm gonna drop it again. So drop table, employees, boom, and then we can run that show tables again, and this will show you that there are no more tables on there. So I didn't want to move forward without showing you guys that. Now the last thing I want to show you guys is how to actually drop a database, and essentially that's deleting the entire database. Just like we deleted the entire table, we can delete the entire database. So let's go down and type that command in right fast, but it's simply drop and then database. And like I said, it's just like a sentence, and then we need to specify that database name. So DB name and then semicolon at the end of it, press enter, and that will drop that database. And now we can type show databases and then the semicolon at the end of it and press enter, and this will let you verify that that name database is gone. So you won't see it anymore. So we're good to go. Now be very cautious when running that command, because it will remove all tables and data within that database. So just be very careful with it. Okay, so moving on to the next part of the course, we need to have a database with lots of data so you can see examples clearly. And I'm going to import a test database named employee, and this is on GitHub. And let me switch over to my browser so you guys can see the link. And if you want to do the same, you can find a link in the description to import the database. And this database was created by Bytebase on GitHub. And like I said, I'll have the link so you can get here. But let me just show you guys the directory structure. So they have a MySQL dump that you can import, and this will generate a full SQL database for you. It's called the employees database. So if we go under MySQL, you can see they have a Postgres as well if you need a example, but MySQL is what we'll be using. And they have a data full or a data set full, data set large, data set small. And the full will have the full amount of data, which is the one I recommend you guys use. They also have a large, which is a smaller version of the full. It doesn't have as much data in it. And then the small is kind of like a sample size of the data. So you can use that as well. It really doesn't matter. Just pick which one you want. I'll import the dataset full. Essentially what we're going to do is install this data dump. It's a SQL dump, and I'll get to this in a later part of the video where I show you guys how to back up databases and import databases or restore databases. But this is the file we'll import. And let me go down and go here first. And what I want to do is clone this repository to the server. So we're going to copy that link and then go back to our server terminal and exit out of MySQL. So we could just type exit, and this is a good time for me to show you guys how to exit. You could just type exit and press enter, and it'll get you out of MySQL. And now that we're back at the terminal, we can go down and install Git, because we need Git installed. So we could just type sudo dnf install and then git and press enter, type in our sudo password, boom, and it'll go through install Git as well as all its dependencies, and we type Y for yes, boom. Now go down and install Git on our system, and now we can Git clone that actual repository, and we don't need to change directories. We can use our home directory, and so all we have to do is type git clone, and then we can paste that link and press enter, and it'll clone down that actual repository for us. And now we can import this test database. So first thing you need to do, let's ls right fast. I can show you guys the directory, but we need to cd into that directory, and we want to go into MySQL, and then we need to go into the directory of the location of the size of the database that you want to install. So let's tab it out right fast, but there is that full, like I said. So that's the directory we need to go into. Now, if you want to go into the other ones, you just select large or the small one as well. You can select that one as well. Like I said, I'm gonna do the full, boom, press enter. And if we ls this directory, this will show you all the files that are in there, and this will allow you to see the file that we want to import. And we need to use sudo because we're running MySQL under a regular account, which is that Josh account. So we get sudo MySQL, and then what we want to do is use the left arrow and then the actual SQL file that we want to import, or the database that we want to import, which is that employees.sql file. So let's go down and press enter. This will take a little time because the full is pretty big. It has about 300,000 records in, at least in the employees table, and so it does take a while. Let me go down and press enter. We're gonna need this in order so I can show you guys this information in a better way as far as running the queries and the different things I want to show you guys in the examples. It's best to have a database with a lot of data in it, and this is the quickest and easiest way to set that up. And like I said, this, see that table right there, it says loading employee. That's the biggest table that's in there, and it's going to take a while to actually import everything. So I'll be back when it finishes, and then we can log back into SQL and go through the more of the examples. All right, so the import completed successfully. It took about 3 minutes and 57 seconds. And so let me show you guys how to test it right fast. I'm gonna ls this directory again so you guys can see, but there is a test file in here. It's a md5 hash test. So we can run this test by typing sudo MySQL and then -t, and we need to put our left arrow in there again, and then that test underscore employee underscore md5 dot SQL, and that will test the actual database and just make sure everything was imported successfully on the server. So just go down and run it right fast, and it'll have some output. You guys will see, and as long as you don't see any errors, that means everything was imported successfully. All right, so the test is complete, and we can scroll through this and just see that it just verifies that everything is okay. So all the records match, you know, what's supposed to be imported when you run this thing. And as you can see, it took a while because this server doesn't have many resources assigned to it. It would have ran a little faster if I had more processing power and probably a little bit more RAM on the system, but it's fine. It ran through and did it. It's not affecting you guys that's watching the video. It's only affecting me because this is the computation time that it took. All right, so let's go down to CD right fast just to get out that directory. We don't need to, and I'm gonna clear again. And let's go down and get back in our MySQL database. So let's type sudo MySQL -u for user, and we want to go back into that root account and -p, press enter. It'll ask us for our sudo password, boom, and it'll ask us for the password for the root. And if you guys remember from earlier, there is no password set for the root account. So let's press enter. That'll get us in MySQL. And then what I wanted to do was show the databases. So that same command we ran earlier. So show databases, semicolon at the end, press enter, and we'll see that new database is added to our server. So we got the employees database. So now we can move on to the rest of our examples of how to manage MySQL. All right, so the next section I want to cover is managing user accounts in MySQL. And this is a very important section because this basically manages how people access your MySQL server, even applications, how those applications connect to your MySQL server as well as the databases in it. And so the the first thing I want to do is show you guys how to create a new user account. And this allows you to control who has access and can manage your databases. And so it's not that difficult of a command. And it's just like I talked about in previous commands. It's almost like writing a sentence. And so all you have to do is type create and then user. And then we have to put the user information in there. So we have to put it in single quotes. So the name first. So let's just name this DB user. And then after that quote, we have to put an @ because you have to say how you want this user to connect to the server. And you put this in single quotes as well. And this is considered the host name. And most of the time you will see localhost, which is what I'll use currently. And that basically means that this user can connect to this MySQL server via localhost. So you have to be connected to this server in order to access this MySQL database. And then after that, you want to give it a way to access the server, and that is via a password. So identify, so you have to type it in properly. Just make sure you type it in properly, because I used to spell this incorrectly a lot of times and I ran into errors, but it's identified by, and then our password, which I'll just put password 23 and then close these single quotes. And then after that, for our SQL statement, we have to close it out by typing a semicolon at the end of it. And this will create our new user account. As you can see, as long as you don't run into any errors, it says query okay, 0 rows affected, you're good to go. You created that user account. And like I said earlier, this command sets up a user account with access limited to the local host, meaning that the user can only connect to MySQL server from the same system where MySQL is running. And I just want you guys to understand that, because if you want to grant access from, let's say, another host, then you have to replace that local host with the remote machine's IP address. So let's say you have an application running on a application server and you wanted that user account to connect from that application server, because let's say this user account is what allows that application to connect to the MySQL server, then you have to put that IP address of where it's connecting from. Otherwise, it won't have access. It'll just have access via local host like it states. Now, there is a wildcard, and the wildcard, it'll allow access from any host. And let's go down and type it out again. So create user, and I'll create another user account. So let's put it in single quotes. So DB user 2, and this is a totally different account. Press the @ symbol, and then the host we want it to be able to connect from, I'll use that wildcard, and the wildcard is the %. And so that's shift 5, and then we have to close those single quotes. And then next, let's put identified by, and then we put our password. So I'm gonna use that same password, 1, 2, and then our single quote to close it out, and then our semicolon to close that query out. And let's press enter, because we won't run into any issues. We typed everything correctly, and this is considered that wildcard. Now, let's say you need to change the SQL user account's password. Well, let me walk you guys through that query right now, and it's using the alter command. And the way you do it is by typing alter user, and like I said, it's just like a sentence. So alter user, and let's say we want to alter that DB user, that first one. Let's say we want to change it to, and then we have to type it all out. Just make sure you type it all out. Localhost, then single quote, and then identified. So that's basically all you're doing is typing it out the exact same way we did to create that user, but you're using alter. So identified by, and then we just type in a new password. So let's go password 456, and let's close out those quotes, and then the semicolon at the end of it, and press enter, and that will alter the password for it. And like I said, as long as you don't see any errors, you're good to go. Now, another command I want to show you guys is how to list out all the MySQL user accounts. And there are some built-in user accounts. You obviously got that root one, and you got a couple more, and you guys will see them once I type in this next command. So we're going into select statement. So select user, and then comma host, and basically we're selecting 2 columns within a specific table, and this is from the MySQL.user table. So let's go down and put that semicolon at the end, press enter, and that'll grab those 2 columns for us. And as you can see, we can see all our accounts that we created, even the new ones that we just created. So DB user, it's only accessible via the local host, and DB user 2 has that wildcard there. And just to show you guys the other accounts that are there, so MySQL.info schema, I don't recommend you mess around with any of these accounts, at least until you understand fully what they do. But these 3 accounts are systems accounts. And then we got our root account as well, which we're logged in using that. Now, the next step is deleting those user accounts. So let's say we want to delete the DB user account. So it's the same as with tables and databases. It's the drop command. And so drop user and then the user account. So we have to put that in single quotes, and it's just like when we created it, the exact same format. So DB user, and let me move the cursor out the way, and then close out that single quote, then at, and then open up a single quote. Let me close it right fast. I always do that. That's just a habit, but localhost. And then we go back to the end and type that semicolon at the end and press enter, and that will drop that. So let's press the up arrow and go back in here and select those user accounts right fast from that MySQL users table, and you'll see that that DB user is gone from the system. Now let's test out this user account that we still have available on the server. And so what I'm gonna do is type exit. That'll get us out of that root account, and let's run the MySQL command, but let's log in using the DB user 2 account. And so you basically type it in just like we typed in for roots, press enter, and then type in our sudo password for our Josh accounts. Just make sure you understand that it's going to ask you that for that password twice. Let's go down, press enter, and then now it's going to ask you for the DB user 2 password, which we set when we created the account, and that password was password with a capital P and then 123, and press enter, and that'll allow us to log into MySQL. So now let me show you guys some of the differences, because right now this account doesn't have any permissions to any databases on the server. So let's run show databases and then semicolon at the end, and you guys should see the difference. We only see 2 databases, and these are the schema databases that are built into MySQL. And so that lets you know that this user account doesn't have access to any of the databases on there. And so I want to go into the grant section of managing these user accounts. So let's go down and exit out, because we need to add some permissions to this account so they can actually see the databases or do certain things to the database, like select statements and all that good stuff. So let's go down and log back in using our root accounts. Type in our password, which is nothing, and let's go down and show that those user accounts again on the system. So select user and then host at that MySQL.user database. That way we can have a reference when we're typing everything out. So what we want to do is grant privileges to that user account. So all we have to do is type grant, and there's a whole bunch of privileges that can be set for a user account. There's all privileges. You can set certain things like alter. They can only alter a specific table. They can create tables, create databases. That's to create privileges. But what I'm gonna do is just do all privileges, just to show you guys the base level of actually giving an account. And actually that's not the base level. I recommend you give the least access that a user needs. So if they only need access to a specific database and they only need to, let's say, select certain things, then you want to just give it select permissions. You don't want to give it all privileges if it doesn't need it for that account. But like I said, I'm gonna just do all privileges just to make it simple, just so you guys can see. But I recommend you guys look at all the different types of privileges so you can understand them and give the least privileges needed for the account. So privilege, and make sure you type it in right, but that's privileges. And let's say we only want to give them access to a specific database. Well, you put on that database name, and we'll use that employee database. It's employees, and you want to give it access to all the tables. So you just put a period and then the star at the end of it. That's like a wildcard for all the tables under that database. And now we have to put in the user account we want to apply this to. So that's why I say it's like a sentence. You know what I'm saying? Grant all privileges on this database, all tables, to the user account. And so that user account is the DB user 2, and then at the single quote and then the wildcard, single quotes, and then our semicolon, and press enter, and it will grant those privileges. Now let's go down and exit out again, because I just want to show you guys. But if we log back in under that user account that we created, so password 123, center, skip back in it, and let's run that show databases command and semicolon at the end, press enter. As you can see, we now have access to that employee's database. Let's go down and exit out and get back into our root account. But I just wanted to show you guys that's how you grant those privileges. Now, let's say you want to grant all privileges on all databases. Let me go back up here to that, and all you have to do is put in the wildcard. So the wildcard in front of the period, and that specifies all databases and all tables under each one of those databases. And so we got all those permissions now. So we can exit out and then log back into that account and type in our password again and press enter. And then let's show databases. And this is something you definitely don't want to do. I just want to show you guys that you can do it. You see how you can see the other SQL databases on here. Like before, we couldn't see MySQL or that sys database. Now we have access to see pretty much all databases and all tables. And let's exit out, go back into our root accounts, boom. And it doesn't make sense to go through everything. So I'll just show you guys a few other things. Let's say you wanted to go employee database. And I know one of the specific tables in there is department. And so employee department, you only want this user to have access to just that database with that table. You only want that user to have access to that specific thing. Like I said, you can narrow this down, deep. So people only have, or user accounts only have access to specific parts of a database. This can be accomplished by typing out the commands like this. And then I won't run this. I'll just go back in. Let's put the store in there because I wanted to show you guys something else. But let's say you, instead of granting all privileges to this server, we can go back in here, remove those privileges, and we can add a whole bunch of other privileges. So we could just do select. Let's say you want to do an insert, and then you can also put like delete, and then on this database and all tables. So you can narrow down, like I said, even more with this grant command. And let me just go down and run that and just see what happens. And let's actually exit out. I want to see what it looks like when we go over there. Boom. I want to see if it removed all the other privileges. So let's log in and then run the show databases and semicolon. Boom. And we can see all the tables. So it still has those permissions for all the databases. So you might want to run a revoke before that and then run it so it specifies. Okay, that makes sense. So it still has those settings still there for all privileges, all tables. So let's exit out, and now let's walk through how to revoke permissions. So this is an important part. You want to revoke permissions, or at least understand how to revoke our privileges for a specific user, and we'll go through and do that for this account. And let's go back in here and select all the user accounts. I always like to do that so I can have a reference when I'm typing out things, so I don't misspell certain things. But the command is revoke, and revoke all privileges on, and I'm gonna actually put store there as for all databases, and then period, all tables. And then from that specific account, which is our DB, and forgot about our quotes, but yeah, single quotes in there. Make sure you type that in. And then this one has the wildcard on the end of it, so we'll type it out exactly how it is up there. So from that user account on this server. So let's go down and press enter. And we forgot about our semicolon. So if you do forget about it, it'll bring it up on the second line. You can just type in the semicolon, press enter, and that'll run the query. And so let's exit out again. I know I keep jumping back and forth, but I just want to verify a lot of this stuff and that I'm showing you guys the right thing. And I want you guys to follow along so you can get used to it, because once you start typing these commands out, you get the hang of it, fairly quickly. So let's go down and type out our show databases again, and then put that semicolon at the end. Boom. You'll see we don't have access to any of the databases on the server. And then let's exit out. And what I want to do is show you guys something else after this. Let's log back in our root account and grant some privileges again. And I want to get real specific with this account, and that way the next command I show you guys will make a lot more sense. And so let's run grants and then select, and let's also do that inserts as well, and then the delete on the employees database. And let's get that departments table within that database, and it's not a S. Now that I think about it, it's not a S. And then let's type 2, and then our user account, which is that DB user 2, and then then the wildcard, and then the semicolon at the end, and press enter, and it'll grant those specific permissions for that user account. And now let me show you guys the last command, which is the show grants. So we could show all the grants that we have for a specific user. So, and let's type it in correctly, and we have to type in that user account the exact same way. So DB user 2, and then at our wildcard, and then a semicolon at the end, and press enter. And this will show you the specific permissions that this user has. And as you can see, it has grant, select, insert, delete on the employees database, and then the departments table for that user. So it's very specific. You can get very specific with these privileges. Now, this next section, we'll be diving into queries. And this is where that employees database will come into effect. And I'll show you guys different types of queries throughout the demonstration. So first thing we need to do is select that database that we want to use. So first off, let's show our databases. And I just want to get you guys in the habit of actually doing this, but show databases, semicolon at the end, press enter. That will show us all our databases that we have on the server. And what we're looking for is that employees database. And that's the one we want to select by using the use command. So use, and then the database name. So employee. And then let's put a semicolon at the end, press enter. And now our database has been changed to the employees database. That's the one we are currently using. Now, the core of querying data is the select statement, and it retrieves data from tables, and you can customize what you want to see. Now, first off, we need to find out what the tables are in the database, and we can go back to that command that says show tables, and then semicolon at the end, press enter, and it will show us all the tables within the employees database. And now let me show you guys the basic structure of the select statement. And all we have to do is type select, and then we'll start off with star, which is for everything, is pretty much the wildcard for all columns within the table. And then we want to specify that table, so from a specific table. So we could pick one in here. Let's start with the departments table, and then put a semicolon at the end, press enter, and that will list out all the data within that table. And you can do this for each table within the database. And so let's look up here. We have another table, and I'll start with the employees one as well. So there's the employee table as well. So let's run that select from, but instead of selecting the department, let's look at the employees, and let's put a semicolon at the end, press enter, and you'll see it'll pull up a lot of data. This table has about 500,000 records within this one table, and that's representative of all the employees within this organization. And so that select statement will pull everything with that star wildcard in there in the select statement. Now, let's say we want to look at the first 10 rows of this table. Well, we can limit the results that are put in front of us by using the limit clause within our select statement. So we can go to the end of this select statement, and we can limit the results to, let's say, 20. We only want to see the first 20 records. So we can go down and press enter, and this will limit the results, and you'll see that we only have 20 rows pulled. And like I said, this is just a way of limiting it really for you guys that are watching this video, so you guys can see less data on the screen. Now let's work on these columns. Let's say we only want to see specific columns, so certain data we only need for whatever we're running this select statement for. And so let's go through and let's hit the up arrow, and I'll be using the up arrow a lot, and this allows me to run previous queries. But let's say we don't want to pull all those columns. Like I said, you can specify specific columns. So let's say we only want to look at the employee number and the first name and the last name. So we could type EMP underscore number, and then we put a comma behind it, and then first underscore name. And then let's look at the last name as well. So last underscore name, and then we can press enter. We don't have to put a comma after that. That is the last column that we want to pull. And also let's change the limit as well, so I can show you guys the information right on the table, so it doesn't pull in too much more information. Let's go down and hit 10 and press enter, and boom, as you can see, it only pulls in those particular columns that we specified in our select statement. So employee number, first name, last name, and there you go within the table. So employee number, first name, last name, boom. Now, one other thing with the select statement, you can pull in this information in whatever order you want to. And what I mean by that is the columns. Let's say we don't want to see we want to see the employee ID after our first name and last name. So let's go back to the end of it, put a comma and let's pull in that employee underscore number, and let's pull it in that order. We want to see first name, last name, or actually let's do it a little bit different as well. We can do first name right here. So let's put a space and go first underscore name and then put that comma there. And then let's remove the first name up here at the front. And we want to pull last name, first name, and then employee number. So let's go down and press enter. And as you can see, it'll put it in that order for us. So last name, first name, and then employee number at the end. Now, let's say we want to filter the data, and I don't know how many results will come up. Let's say if I select a specific name. So I'm gonna just select one just to see. And I want to see how many employees have this same last name. So Bamford. And I know this is a fake name, but there is a way of filtering, and this is using the where clause in our query. So we can up arrow, and then let's go back in here and put the store. Let's remove the columns. Just put the store in there for the wildcard from employees, and then where we want to type the where clause in there. So let's take this limit off. I'm not going to use it. I'm gonna see what pulls up. But where the last name underscore, and we need to put a equal sign in it because we're searching for something specific. So we're searching for the last name to be a specific variable. And so let's put it in quotes and let's paste it in there right fast. I don't think you guys can see that, but Bamford. We want to look for people with the last name of Bamford within the employees table. So let's go down and press enter and see how many results we get. And we get a whole bunch of results. So it's 178 rows that meet that criteria. And that's essentially how you filter using the where clause. And then we can filter this down even more. Let's say we want to look for all the females that have the last name Bamford. So let's put the up arrow up there. And then after the Bamford, we could put another clause, which is and. So, and the gender equals, and then we want to specify female. So let's put it in a single quote as well. So with a capital F, and boom, we are good to go. Let's see what it pulls up. And it pulls up everybody that has the last name of Bamford with the gender of female. So that's super cool. And then you could specify that query, columns. If you want to, you can go in here and pull in the last name and then the first name and then the gender. And then let's go down and pull in an employee number as well. So, and let's go down and press enter. And boom, it'll pull in just those 4 columns that we wanted, as well as searching for that specific criteria. So we got our last name of Bamford, and then all female employees with all the columns we requested to see. And then you can modify it. You can change this to, let's say, male. We want to see all the male employees like that. And as you can see, it pulls in, specifically males for these results. And it's 103 males versus 75, females. So let me show you guys another option you can run with the select statement, and that is the order by. And first off, let me run a normal select. So select store from the employee table and semicolon at the end, press enter, and I will pull in all the information. And what I wanted to do was look at this column right here. This is the actual hire date of the employee. So let's say we want to order the results by that hire date, and let's look at the oldest employee up to the newest employee. And so let's run a select again, but let's limit it to just 10, and I'm only doing that so you guys can see a little clearer. So that shows pretty much the first 10 records, or the first 10 results, and their hire date. And like I said, I want to show you guys the order by clause. And so we can type that select store from employees. I'm gonna leave that limit there, but the other option is order by, and it's 2 words. And what we want to order it by is the column. So that's the hire date. So let's type hire underscore date and press enter. And as you can see, it'll pull up the oldest dates. And so that's 1985, January 1st, and it goes up from there. So these are our oldest employees. And the reason we know it's going up because the next employee on a different date that was hired is January 14th. So 1985. So it'll go up from there. And I just want to limit the results so you guys can kind of see it in that order, and you can order it by a specific column. And a lot of times you want to look for that. And then also you can do the exact same thing thing for this. This is another date column, but there is a birth date. And so we can change that up and not use the hire date, but instead of that, let's look at the birth dates. And this could be for, let's say, HR purposes or something to that effect. Let's say you want to look at the birth date of all your employees. For whatever reason, you can order, all the results by those dates. And then you can also throw your filtering in there with the where clause. So let's go down and press enter. Boom. And as you can see, that's our oldest employee right there, or a couple of our oldest employees right here that have the same birth date, which is February 1st of 1950. It's what's that, about 6 employees that have that same birth date. And so this is a good reason to show you guys another way of filtering by using that where clause. And let's say we were looking for all the people with a birth date, but in just the year of 1950. So we can go through and just search for specific people with a birth date of 1952. And let me show you guys that. Break out this order by, let's remove it, and let's use our where clause. So let's go where the birth dates underscore, and there's another clause in there you could put, and that's like. And this allows you to search for text that match but also have different things either in front of it or behind it. And what we're looking for is that year of 2, and so we have to put it in single quotes. So single quotes, and then there is a wildcard of the %. So anything before, which it doesn't have anything before, we really don't need to put that there. I just wanted to put it there so you guys can see. But let's say 50 and put that wildcard at the end of it, so anything after that as well, and then the quote at the end of it to close it out. And let's go down and press enter. Boom, and that'll pull in all the employees with a birth date within 2. Now let's explore how to add data to a table. And first off, let's show the tables again right fast. So let's go show tables, semicolon, press enter. And what I want to do is look at the departments table, because that's the easiest one to work with when it comes to inserting data. And let's run a select on the departments table right fast. Select star from departments, and then semicolon at the end, press enter. As you can see, we only have a couple records, so 9 rows. So let's say we want to add a new department. Well, to insert new data, we have to use the insert into statement. And so let me give you guys a quick example. We can run through and type insert into, and then we want to insert it into the department table. And then now we have to specify our columns. So we have the department number and the department name. So we need to put parentheses in here, and this is to specify our columns. So let's start off with the first one. So department, so DEPT underscore number, and then put a comma after that, and then a space, and then the department name. So DEPT underscore name. And now that we have our columns selected, where we want to insert data, we have to type in the values that we want to put into each one of those columns for this new row that we're adding. So values, and then we have to put it in the same order as they're represented up here. So our department number and department name, and we just put those values, and we have to put them in a single quote. So let's put the first one in, which is our department number. And as you can see, the next number is department 10. So let's put D010, and that's department 10. And I know you guys can't tell, but it's out of order, but department 9 is the highest one, so I want to go with department 10. That's how I figured that out. But let's put a comment in here. Now let's add our department name, and let's say this is the technology department, so, or information technology, whatever you want to put in here. You want to put it in quotes again. Sorry about that, I didn't put the quotes in, but put it in quotes, and then close out our parentheses. Anything you open, you need to close, and we close out that parentheses, and then put semicolon at the end, and this will insert that data into the departments table. So let's go down and press enter. Boom, query okay, 1 row affected. And now let's select from that department table again, and you guys should see our new row, which is our technology row. So D00, and that's the top, the technology department. Now let's say we made a mistake while inserting that data into it. Well, we could use another statement, which is a update statement, which will allow you to make changes to any of the data within the table. And when you're building out this query, you want to make sure you find some form of a unique identifier. That's why majority of tables will have a primary key or some type of number that identifies that row, especially if you don't want duplicates within the table. And so our unique identifier is the department number, because that's different per row that's in the table. And so we'll use that as our where clause when we type out our update query. So let's go down and break this out. So let's type updates, and what we want to update is something in our departments table. So update departments, and let's say we want to change the technology to help desk. So we have to type set and then department name, or the column that we're looking for, which is that department name that we're changing. So depart underscore name, and we want it to be, so we can do equals, and we put it in single quotes. So let's say we want to change that to help desk. So the help desk department, if you know, I'm just coming up with something, but we need that unique identifier. So where department number equals, and we can put this in single quotes. This is just basically to search for it, but the D010, and then let's close it out with the semicolon, and it should update that department name where the department number is D010. So let's go down and press enter, and that should make changes to it. So as you can see right there, it says rows matched and then rows changed, and no warnings. As long as we don't see any warnings or errors, we're good to go. So let's go down and select from that table again, and as you can see, we have a help desk department now, and that's D010. Now let's say we want to delete that row, that help desk row we just created. So there is a statement you can run, and that is the delete statement. So let's go down and type this out. So delete, and then we want to delete from the department table. So we have to type that out, and then where the department, and I already know what to use. I'm gonna use department number because that's our unique identifier, and plus it's super short and specific as far as the department number, and there's no other number like that, so you can't make a mistake. But department number equals, and we use that exact same format, so single quotes, and then D010, and then put a semicolon at the end, but that will delete that row from the table. So boom, and as you can see, query okay, and then we can go back in, select from the departments, and you'll see that help desk is gone. I know it's kind of hard to see because it's not ordered properly, but yeah, help desk is gone from this table. So the next thing I want to cover is primary keys and foreign keys. Now, first off, let me explain what a primary key is. A primary key in MySQL is like a special ID for each row within the table. It's a unique number or code that helps you identify and organize the data. So if you think about it, it's just like your fingerprint is unique to you. A primary key ensures that each row within a table is different from the others. And this makes it easier to find and manage information within a database. And let me start off by showing you guys a primary key right fast, which I showed you one earlier in the video when we created our first table. But let's show you the primary key within one of the tables within this employees database that we're looking at now. So let's start off with the employees one by running the describe command, and this will basically give you the information about a particular table. And let's type employee and then semicolon at the end, press enter. And like I said, this will give you all the information about this table. And as you can see right here under key, this column right here, it says prime, that stands for primary. So our employee number is our primary key. And typically the data type is integer, and pretty much a primary key is unique. So this number is different for each row within the table. Now let's talk about a foreign key. And a foreign key is like a bridge between two tables. It helps one table understand information from another table. So for instance, this employees table, and let's say the departments table. Well, a foreign key in the employees table links to the departments table, showing which department each employee belongs to. And it's like a connection that keeps data organized and related between tables. And what I want to do is create a foreign key using both of those tables, and let's describe the departments table right fast so you guys can see the information about that table as well. And departments, and then semicolon, press enter, and I'll describe that table as well. And as you can see, the primary key is the department number. And so what we want to do is add the department key, which is that primary key or the department number, to this table. And that way we can have a foreign key or a foreign connection between the department as well as the employees. So each employee will know what department they work for. And so this is a great example. And the first thing we need to do is add another column here, because you can't use a column, any of the columns that are already there, because they already have data in it. So you need to add another column to this table. And what I typically do when I'm adding a foreign key, I'll use the same field name. That way you don't get confused with it. And so let's go down and alter this table. So alter table, and then we want to alter the employees table. And what we want to do is add a column, and I haven't showed you guys this yet, but add column. And then what we want to do is specify the column name. So we want to add department underscore number, and then we have to tell the character type. And that's why I described this table as well, the departments table. Department number is char, so characters, and 4 characters. So let's go down and put the exact same thing. So char, and then in parentheses we could put the number 4 in there, so 4 characters. And let's go down and put a semicolon at the end of it, and this will alter that table. Boom, and we're good to go. So query okay, 0 rows affected. And then let's describe our employees table again. Let's go back in here and look at describe employee. Boom. As you can see, we have a new column in there. It's that department numbers. It has that same data type, which is char4. And I put in there yes. I left it yes, as it could be null, and the default is null. And now let's go down and alter our employees table in order to make that a foreign key. And so let's walk through this. We could type alter and then table and then the employee table. And what we need to do is add a constraint, and you can name the actual foreign key. And that's what this line actually means. So add constraint, and let's name our foreign key. Let's name it foreign key, let's see, underscore departments underscore number. And so I'll just give it something unique, foreign key, so that FK and then underscore department number, that's the name of our constraint. And then let's press enter, and then let's add our foreign key. So let's go foreign key, and then we have to specify that column within our table, our employee table, and that is the department underscore number. And let's go down and close that out, press enter, and then we have to reference our foreign key. So the reference is going to be in our department table. So we have to type references and then department, and then specify that column as well, which is basically the same. So department underscore number, and let's go down and close that out. And then we put our semicolon at the end, and let's press enter. And it should add our foreign key. And as you can see, that kind of took a little while. It was about 53 seconds that it took, so almost a minute, because of the 300,000 rows that it has to go through. And basically it's just updating that column and marking it as a foreign key location. Now let's go down and run a quick select right fast so you guys can see that column in action. So select store from our employee table, and let's limit it to 10 because I don't want to see all those rows. Let's go down and press enter. Boom. And as you can see, we have that department number column. And then also let's describe that table as well. So let's go in here and look at our employees table again under the describe. And as you can see, it is a foreign key. And just to explain what this means right here, it says mul. So that basically means multiple. And this is our foreign key. So that means that multiple occurrences of a given value are permitted within that column. So that's essentially what that means. Now, next, I'll run a quick query, and this is an update query. It'll actually take me a while to actually run this because I'll do an update. And what I'm doing is grabbing random department IDs and dropping it into our employees table under that new department number column. And this is so I can next show you guys how to work with joins. So you can follow along if you want to. If you don't, this will take some time depending on the resources on your server, because it has to go through 300,000 rows and update them. So what I want to do is update the employee, and what we want to do is set that department number within that table, and we want it to equal some information that we select basically. And this is basically a nested query, so to speak. So I'm gonna just throw this in there, and that's to open up the parentheses for the other query. And what I'm doing is a select, and then we want to select that department number, and what we want to select it from is the departments table. So let's press enter from department table, and we want to order it because there's other options. Like I said, I didn't go too deep into a lot of these options, but there are plenty of options out there. I didn't want to, it'll take me all day to go through all the options that you could do within a select query. I just wanted to show you the base level, and then you can build from there by looking at the documentation. And what I want to do is use a variable that's built into MySQL, which is called random. And so RAND, and then we put the parentheses at the end of it. It'll basically pull random department numbers for each row within this table. And so let's type a limit in there, and we want to limit to 1. And then let's close out our top parentheses up here. Anything you open, you must close. So close that parentheses and then put our semicolon at the end. And like I said, this is going to take some time. And if you want to, just pause the video. That way you can copy this, and that way you can run this query as well to update your employees table with a random department number. So let's go and press enter. And like I said, this is going to run for a little while, and I'll be back. And it should tell you at the end of it how long it took me. And let's compare times. Be right back. All right, cool. So that wasn't too long. It was 35 seconds. So 35.28. Let me know if you beat my time down in the comments. But it updated each one of those rows with a random department number. And let's verify this by selecting star from our employee table and semicolon at the end, press enter, and that'll give us our results. And as you can see, it has a random department number throughout the whole table. And so that'll allow me to show you guys joins. Now, one other thing I did was I went back and ran another query that'll change some of the department numbers to null. So that way the inner joins and the left joins and all that stuff will show properly, so you guys can get a good example of how they work. And so let's start off by explaining what a join is. It's like bringing two tables together to find related information. And there are 3 types of joins. And the first join I want to show you guys is a inner join, and it shows only common data between both tables. For example, if we join that employees table and the departments table using the department number, which is our foreign key within that employees table, we'll get a list of employees belonging to specific departments. And so it'll exclude all the rows that have null in it. It doesn't have a specific department in it. And let's go down and run a inner join right fast, and let's type select, and I'll put this stuff on multiple lines. So select star from employee, and then what we want to do is a inner join between 2 different tables, and the other table is our department table because they both have something in common, which is that department ID. And so we have to specify that. So hit on, type on, and this is basically an inner join in departments on these specific columns. So let's type employees first, which is our first table, and we want to match our department's number column within this table. So let's make sure I type it in correctly. So department underscore no, and then we want to make sure it equals the department and then dot department underscore number. And then let's close out our query and press enter. And this will give you a good clear picture of what it actually does. So what it'll do is it'll bring in all the information from both tables. So we got our employee ID, we have that date of birth, we have that first name, last name, and then their gender, and then their hire date. And then we also have that employee ID, and we have it twice. And this is the one represented within our employees table. And then this one right here is the representation of the one in our department table, and then our cells. So that's considered a inner join. And basically it's joining on those 2 columns, just matching them up. And one other thing I want to point out, as you can see, the row amount is actually 300,000 rows within there, but some of them are set to null, or they have null within that department ID, and so they're excluded. And so that's what makes the difference between an inner join and a left join and a right join. The inner join will only bring in rows that match 100%. So if this doesn't have a department ID, it will exclude it from the result. And let's run this query again right fast, and let me show you something a little bit different. So we're going to run a inner join again, and this applies to all the different types of joins, a left join and a right join as well. You can select specific columns. And so let's say we only want to see the employee number. So let's put that there. And then the first name as well as our last name, and then the department that they work for. So this is from that other table that is joined. So let's type department and then underscore name. So we want to see their employee ID or employee number, their first name, last name, and then the department that they work for. And we don't have to put a comma at the end of it. And let's go down and press enter, and that should pull in just that information that we requested. And as you can see, you don't have to see that department ID. You could just see the department name. And that's a great way of organizing the results and using a join to bring in information from other tables. Now, a left join, this type shows all the data from the left table, which is our employees that table, and only matching data from the right table. So it'll list all the employees and their departments if they're available. So this is where we'll bring in those nulls, because certain records won't have a department ID, but it'll still bring in those employees, and it'll just show null next to it. So let's go down and do a left join right fast. And all I'm gonna do is go over here. I'm gonna leave everything the same, and we're gonna type left here. And like I said, it's gonna pull everything from the employees table, and it's all based on that department number, you know, all that good stuff. So let's go down and run it again, and you'll see that it'll pull in all the records, and then you'll start seeing all the nulls in there. So this will bring in all our employees, and it'll also show you the ones that have an employee ID associated with it. It'll show that employee name as well, and then null for the ones that don't have one. So that's what a left join will do. It'll basically bring in all the records from the left table and then the information that's related from the other table, instead of excluding all the nulls or the exact matches. And then the right join is the exact opposite. It'll basically display all the data from the right table and the matching data from the left table. And this will give you a list of all departments and their employees, if any. And so this right join, it may look a little weird. Let's see. Let's actually see what happens. But let's go right. And this may not work too well. And this is based on my mind just thinking through what it'll actually show. So let's go through and look at it right fast. And it kind of looks like that inner join, because it'll only bring in records from that table that match. So that right join won't really work for this example. But you can see it actually works. It works. It pulls in only those that match the right table, which excludes all the nulls. And so that's pretty much how to use joins in MySQL. All right, so let me show you a little bit more advanced of a view. And I'll just kind of type this one out so you guys can see. But first, let me explain exactly what I'm trying to do. So if we select our departments table, so select star from department and then semicolon at the end, press enter. Boom. Let's say we want to add into this table the amount of employees that are in each department. And so you could do this or accomplish this by using a join. And essentially what we'll be adding is another column here from our employees table that will count the amount of employees that fall under each one of these departments. And so let me go down and show you guys how to do this right fast. And we can type select and then departments underscore number. And this is a way to drill down to all of the columns that we want to use within this table. We can specify it by putting the table as well as the column. And so sometimes you have to do this, because if you leave it kind of generic, especially when some of these tables have the same column title, you have to kind of specify it. Like for instance, the employees table does have that department number column in it. So you want to specify it. And then let's do department table again. And then we want to get that department name, and we need to put that underscore in there. And then now we'll use a built-in variable in order to create our third column here. And what we want to do is count, and you have to put the information within parentheses that you're trying to do as far as the variable, what it's actually doing. So we want to count the employees table and then the employee number column. So EMP underscore number. And now we want to continue out our join. So as number, and this is what we want to name it. So we're naming this column as num of employees. So we can type that in, and then we want to catch that from the departments table. So boom. And now let's build out our join. So let's do a left join, and that way it'll pull everything from the departments table and then all the information that matches within the employees table. So let's go employee and then on, and then we specify what we need to match, and then that is the department number, and then we want that to equal our employee table, and then that department number that we have in there, so underscore number. And now let's add a little more in here. Let's group by department number and then department, and that is the department name that we want to do. So we want to group it by that. So let's go ahead and close it out. This query should run perfectly as long as I didn't type it in incorrectly or type anything incorrectly, but we can go back and check if we need to. So let's go ahead and press enter, see what happens. And yes, it worked correct. So we got our department number, we got our department name, and this is pulling the number of employees from the employee table that fall under each one of these departments. And I kind of just wanted to show you guys something a little bit more complex and what you can actually do with these joins. All right, so let's talk about views in MySQL. And views are like a saved query that you can use to simplify your data retrieval. And it's essentially a virtual table created from one or more existing tables. It doesn't store data itself. And so views allow you to see specific data from your table without altering the original data. And one thing about a view is it's constantly updated, and it's all based on the data in those original tables. So if you delete data in a specific table that's associated with a view, the next time you run that view, it will show you the updated information for that table. And it's all based on how you run the query within the view. And so let me go down and show you guys a quick example right fast. And let's just start with the basic syntax, and that is create view. And like I said, I've said throughout this whole course that these queries sound like sentences. So we want to create a view and we want to name that view. So we want to name it whatever we want to name it. So I'm gonna name this one employee underscore gender, because I want this view to be specific to the genders of the employees within the table. And then we have to type as, because this is the query we want to run every time we run this view. And so let's type select, and then let's look at the first name, so of that employees table, and then the last name of that employees table, and then also the gender. And then let's press enter, and then we want to specify what we want this information pulled from, which is the employees table. And let's put a semicolon at the end to close out our query. Press enter, and it will create our view. As long as you don't see an error, that means the query was okay, it ran successfully, it created that view. Now let's run show tables. That way we can see the actual view, and it looks as though it's a table, and I'll show you guys that in a second. So show tables and press enter, and as you can see, we got our employees gender view there. Now it doesn't put anything next to it, or it doesn't show in any way that it's a view. The only way you can kind of see it is if you're in, let's say, MySQL Workbench, you'll see it'll show up under a different section when you're connected to the database. But we know that it's a view, and so you can interact with this just like any table. And so let's go down in and type in our select statement and store from, and then let's select that view. So employee underscore gender, and then semicolon at the end, press enter, boom. And that's our view, and it'll pull in all the data, and it's all based on what you put within that query for the view, and it'll always show that information the exact same way. And then let's say one of these employees is removed from the original table, then it will update this view automatically. You don't have to update in two different places, like update in the original table and then update within the view. The view will automatically update based on the original table and data. So let me show you guys how to drop that view. So let's run show tables again, and it's essentially like dropping a table. So let's go show tables, and then all you have to do is type drop view. And since we know that's a view, you know, tables won't work. So if you type drop table, that won't work. We have to drop view because we know it's a view. So drop view, then employee underscore gender, and then semicolon at the end, press enter. That'll drop that view for us, so we won't see it anymore. Now let me give you guys another example, and we'll look at a different table because I don't like using that employees table because of amount of data that's in it. Let's focus in on the departments table, and let's just run select right fast, store from department, and then semicolon at the end, press enter, boom. And as you can see, that's all the data within there. Let's add a column to this table. And you guys remember the alter table command. So let's type alter table and then department, and then let's add a column. So add column, and then let's create a email column. And let me tell you how this makes sense. So let's say each department has an email address that's associated with that department. And typically what that's called is a distribution list. So each department will have a distribution list. And so when someone sends an email to that distribution list, it will send an email to all the employees that work for that department. And so that's the concept behind what I'm doing. So let's add the column and let's call it emails. And then let's specify the type of data to be stored in that column. So let's go char, and then let's give it about 50 characters, because like I said, it's an email address, so it probably shouldn't be that long, you know what I'm saying? So 50 characters should work. So let's go and press enter. Boom, that'll go down and create that column for us. And then we can look at the tables again, the department table, and press enter. And as you can see, we have that column now. And so let's add some data to this column. And I'm building this out. You'll see once we get to the view section what I'm actually doing. And so let's update the data by adding an email address for each one of the departments. So let's go update the departments table, and let's set our email for the first one, which is marketing, to equal, and we can put those single quotes in there. That way it'll add that information in there for us. And let's go with marketing@com. And so that's our distribution email address. And then we have to run a where in order so we can specify where that needs to go. Because right now it doesn't know where to put that information, and we want to put that under the marketing department email address. So we could go where department number equals, and then we want to search for one. So D001, we know that that is the marketing role. And so let's put a semicolon at the end and press enter, and that should update that row for us. And let's just run a quick select. All right, fast select from departments. Boom. And as you can see, we got our email address in there for the marketing department. And so I won't bore you guys with watching me do this. I'm basically going to run the last command multiple times, just updating and adding an email address for each one of them. So I'll be back when this finishes. All right, cool. So I updated the table. Let's go down and run a select again. So select store from department and press enter. And as you can see, we have an email address or a distribution email address for each one of the departments within our organization. Now let's go down and create another view. So let's type create view, and then we want to call this view departments underscore email. So that's our department email, and we want to set our query as, and let's go down and type it out, but let's type our select, and then let's pull in just 2 columns within here, and let's look at the departments underscore number, and then also let's look at the email, and then we want to do this from our departments table. Boom. And press enter, and it'll run that query. It'll create that view. And so let's go show, and then you'll see that we have our department email view there. And let's go down and select that view right fast. So select store from department underscore email and semicolon, press enter. And that is our view that we created. Now here is the full example. So let's go into, let's actually insert some more data into our departments tables, like a new department, similar to what we did earlier as far as adding, let's say, a help desk department. So let's go down and write out a quick query to insert into department, and this will add us some data in there. So department, and then specify those columns that we want to update or input data in. We have to put those in parentheses. So departments underscore number, and then departments underscore name, and then we want to use our new column, which is that email column. So let's go and close out our parentheses, and then let's type in the values. So values, and then let's put those in quotes. So let's create a new department number, department 10. So 010. Let's close out those quotes, and then let's give it a department name. So our department name is help desk. We'll just use that same one we used before. So help desk, and then the email address is, we can name it, let's say help, and also let's make sure we add our quotes. I don't want to forget that. So let's put our quotes in there, and then let's put our quotes for our email address as well. So let's name it help@abc.com. Close out our quotes, close out our parentheses, and then put our semicolon at the end of it and press enter. And cool. So we added that new line in there, and let's run a select of our just the normal table. So from departments, and just to show you guys that the information has been updated, so help desk, and then we added in that email address for the help desk department or that distribution list. And then as you can see, this is our view. So we updated it just in our departments table. And so with our view, I'm gonna just run this same select query for our department email view, and you'll see that it'll update based on what's in the original table. So we don't have to update it in two places. That's the whole purpose of me showing you guys this exercise. So as you can see, we got the help desk change that we made to the original departments table. So hopefully that gives you a better understanding of how views work. And it's the same way. Let's say we removed that column out of there, it will update our view as well. All right, so the next thing I want to cover is indexes. And a index is basically a quick reference for your database, and it helps speed up data retrieval. It's a structure that organizes data in a way that makes searching for specific information much faster. So think of it as a index in a book that tells you where to find a particular topic without reading the whole book. So let's go through a few examples right fast. And first off, let me show you guys how to see the indexes that are currently there for a particular table. And what I want to do is look at our employees table. So all we have to do is type show indexes, and then from a specific table, which we will look at the employee table, and just put a semicolon at the end, press enter, and this will show you all the indexes. And there currently are 2 indexes on the employees table currently, and the first one is associated with the primary key, and the second one is the foreign key. But let's say with this table we do a lot of searches by last name. Well, we could create a index to structure and organize that data to make it searchable a whole lot faster. And so let me give you an example of creating that index. And all we have to do is type create index, and then you want to name that index. And what I typically do, or the format I do, is X and whatever column I'm working with. So last name is what we want to search, so, or what we typically search a lot. And then now we have to specify the actual column within the table. We have to specify the table and then the column. So all we have to do is type on our table, which is that employee table, and then we have to specify the column, and we put that in parentheses. So we can go back in here and type our column name, which is last name, and then put a semicolon at the end, press enter, and that will create our index. It takes some time depending on how big the data is, because it has to structure it. But as you can see, that query ran successfully and it created our index. Now let's go back and run the show indexes for employee, and let's see our new index that's in there. And as you can see, it's the IDX last name. That's the name that we gave it. And then it looks at that last name column within the table. And so let's just run a quick query right fast. And you guys may or may not see a difference when we last ran the select on the employees table, because it's all dependent on the amount of data that's in the database, whether this will benefit you or not, and then how often this information is updated as well as searched. So let's type store, and then from employee, and let's put a where clause in there. So where last name equals, and let's look for a employee last name of Baz. I know that's one of the names in there. So let's type B-A-A-Z, and then close that out, and then semicolon at the end, press enter. And as you can see, it took no time to actually find that. It was less than a second to actually pull out the data for Baz. And that's what it'll do. It'll increase that speed on searching within that based on the column that you specify in your index. And so let's remember that. So it took less than a second to actually search for all the employees with the last name of Baz. And so let's drop that index. And this is a good opportunity for me to show you guys how to do that. And essentially all you have to do is type alter table employee, and then we want to drop our index, and then we have to specify that name. So IDX and underscore last name, and that'll drop that index for us. So let's go down and put a semicolon at the end, press enter, that'll drop that index. And then now let's run that same select where we search for the last name of Baz, and press enter, and it took 10 seconds. So you'll see, a difference depending on how much data it is within that table. And so there are some downsides to using a index For instance, there are slower writes. So let's say this table is updated a lot, then it slows down the insertion or the updates and the deletion operations because they must be maintained alongside the data. And I mean the indexes, they have to be maintained. And then also there may be an issue with storage because these indexes, they consume extra disk space. And so if the database is super large, then those resources could be significant. And also the complexity of these indexes, you know what I'm saying? They require regular maintenance. And then also, like, one of the other cons, so to speak, of using indexes is the memory usage. It does use a lot of memory, and that can affect the server's performance. So you have to think about that when creating these indexes and be very strategic. All right, so next I want to talk about subqueries. And a subquery is basically a query within a query. And it's a way to retrieve data from one table based on the results of another query. And for example, you can use a subquery to find employees in a specific department by first querying the department and then using the results to search the employees table. So let's go through a demonstration right fast. And I actually wrote out a query for this, and I'll show you guys that demonstration now. And let's just type select and then store from our employees table. And so this is our main query. This is the main query that we want to use, and I'll show you guys the subquery in a second, but I'll use it under the where clause within this query. So let's go select store from employees and then where department number equals, and this is where we'll put our subqueries, and we have to put our subquery in parentheses because it's a totally separate query. And then let's type another select and then department number. And then what I'll do is pull this information from another table, which is that department's table. So let's type that in, department, and then where department name equals sales. Let's look for the sales department and let's put that in quotes, single quotes, and then let's close out our query and this should work for us. So let's press enter. Boom. As you can see, it pulls in all the people from sales. So that's super dope, right? It goes through and searches and finds all those people with the department name of sales, and it's all based on the department number. So that's essentially a subquery example. And I only wanted to cover like one example because subqueries can get very complex. Well, queries in general can get very complex. And then when you start adding subqueries into the mix, it takes a little time to build out those queries. And so I want you guys to practice writing out queries as well as subqueries based on documentation that you look out there for MySQL or SQL queries. All right, so next I wanted to cover stored procedures. Now, stored procedures are like a reusable script that contains a series of SQL statements. And it's like creating a custom function that allows you to perform specific tasks, especially if they're repeatable. For instance, if you guys remember the query we ran during the join section, and I'll actually paste it in here so you guys can see, but this is the select statement that we created in order to pull the count of employees based on the departments. And so let's go down and run it right fast so you guys can get a picture of what I'm saying. So department number, department name, and then the amount of employees that are in each one of these departments. And so let's say we had to type this out a whole bunch of times. You know, this is something that we reuse all the time, like every day or so. Well, it'll be a pain to have to retype this every single time. So we can create what is called a stored procedure with this query built into it. And so let me give you an example of how to actually do that. So the first thing, let me show you guys something right fast. So if we type select store from departments, and I'm just showing you a basic query so you can understand what I'm going to show you. So at the end of each SQL statement or query, you have to put what they call a delimiter, and the delimiter by default is the semicolon within SQL. But within our stored procedure, while we're creating that procedure, we have to put this query in the middle of another query. And so in order to end the creation of the stored procedure, we have to change that delimiter so it doesn't mess up our actual query that we're going to put in the inside of it. And so I'm not going to run this query. Let's go down and back it off, but I'm going to show you guys how to change the delimiter. And all you have to do is type delimiter, and then we can specify what that delimiter is. Most people use these slashes. That's typically what you'll see in documentation, but there's others you can use, but I'll just use the slashes. So /. Let's press enter, and that will change our delimiter for ending a SQL statement. Now let's go down and type out our stored procedure. And the way you create it is simply create, and then we want to create a procedure, and then we want to name that procedure. So I'll just name it employee underscore count underscore by department. So department. And then at the end of the name of the procedure, we have to put C's. And so this is essentially like a custom function. So after this, we have to continue writing, but we have to specify the beginning of our query that we want to run within our stored procedure. So by specifying it, you have to type begin, and this is just a designator to let SQL know that this is the beginning of the script. And so let's press enter, and then let's paste our query in there. Boom. And right now, if we didn't go in and change our delimiter, when I press enter, it's going to finish out this whole statement that we wrote out, which we don't want it to do. That's why we changed the delimiters. So just like we put the begin here of where our select statement starts, we have to put an end. So if we didn't change that delimiter, we wouldn't be able to end the statement. So let's press enter now. And as you can see, it didn't complete out our SQL statement. And so let's go down to type in and then our slashes, and that will allow us to end this statement that we wrote. So let's go down and press enter. As you can see, query okay, so it ran successfully. It created our procedure. Now let's go down and change our delimiter back. You don't want to forget to do this, otherwise you're going to be running other queries and you'll be like, well, why is it not running properly? And that's because the delimiter hasn't been changed back. So let's type delimiter and then the semicolon, like what is typically used for our queries. Press enter, and that'll change our delimiter back to that semicolon. Now, let me show you guys how to call that stored procedure that we have, because it will use this name right here. So employee count department. So I'm gonna copy it right fast, and then all you have to do is type call, and it's like calling a function. So call and then the procedure name, and then let's go and put the semicolon at the end and press enter, and that will run that query for us. And so that's a great way of running complex queries, you know, that you have to use multiple times, or you run daily or multiple times a day. This is a great way of running those queries by creating a stored procedure, and then you can call that stored procedure. And plus it's less text you have to type. And so lastly, let me show you guys how to drop that stored procedure. So all we have to do is type drop, and this will basically remove the procedure. So procedure and then the procedure name. And I'm gonna paste it in here, but you don't need these parentheses at the end of it. That's mainly just for the function or calling it, and then when you create it, you have to put those parentheses there. But all it is a name. So you want to just drop that procedure by its name without the parentheses. So let's go down and press enter. That will drop that stored procedure. And as you can see, if we call it again, it'll say error because it does not exist anymore. We deleted it. All right, so the next important thing I want to show you guys in MySQL is triggers. And triggers is like a set of predefined actions that automatically occur when specific events take place within your database. And this could be things such as inserting or updating or even deleting data. And so let me go down and show you guys a quick example. And I have to go through a couple processes. One of the first things I want to do is create a new table. I want to show you guys how to create a audit log. And basically the purpose of this is every time we make an update to the employees table, I want this information tracked within another table. And so let's start off by creating that table. So we could type create table, and then let's name this employee underscore audit, and then let's put our information for the table in there. Let's start off with a audit ID. Boom. And then we can make that integer, so int, and then let's make this auto increment, so auto underscore increment, and this is basically to auto number each row within our table. And then let's make this the primary key. Boom. And then let's put a comma there, and let's create our next column, and let's start with the department number because I want to do this based on the department. So let's say, and this is the only example I could think of to show you guys a trigger. So let's say an employee is assigned to a different department and we need to update it, and let's say we want to track those changes. Well, we'll put this in here so it could track the new department for that user. And then this will be an integer, and press comma, and let's get the next step. So let's go with our action. So this is the actual action of what happens as far as the type of query that's running. And like I said, I want to show you guys after an update. So let's go action and then varchar, and let's make the number of characters around 50. Boom. Let's go down, put a comma there. And then lastly, let's put the action date. So this will track the actual time that this change happened within that table. And then we can set the type to timestamp. That's a good one to actually use. And let's press enter and then close out our parentheses as well as the semicolon, press enter, and that should create our table for us. And let's go with a select right fast just to check it out. So select store from our employee underscore audit table, and let's close it out with the semicolon, press enter, and it won't show anything because there's no data in there yet, but our table is created. So now let's go down and create our trigger, and we have to change our delimiter again because of the way I'm writing this trigger. So let's change it to our forward slashes again and press enter. And the way you create a trigger is as follows. So create trigger, and then let's name our trigger. So we can call this employee underscore audits, and then underscore, we can just specify that it is a trigger. And let's go down and type out the details of our trigger. So after an update on the employee table, and then for each row, enter, and then this will be the begin of our statement. So let's type begin and press enter. And then let's do our insert into our employee audit table. And then we want to update specific columns within that table. So let's start off with the department number, and then the action. We want to update the action column as well as our action date. And let's close out those parentheses. And now let's type in our values. So values, and there's a built-in way of looking at the change. Like you could type new, and this will show you the new information that's being inserted into the table. Or you can also look at old, which is the current data that's there. But we want to look at the new data. We just want to track that new data that's being inserted into the table. So new, and then it's coming from the departments underscore number. And then also, let's say we want to just, we know this is an update trigger. So let's say we only want to put text in there that just says update. So we can specify, you know, specific text within a column. So we could just put updates. So each one of the triggers that will happen, it will put update in there. And that's a way of tracking our updates. Then also the action date, we can use a built-in variable, which is now. And I'm gonna type it in all caps so you guys can understand it. But it's just a built-in function that you could use, and that will bring the current time and date and put that into our field. So let's close out our main parentheses, and then let's go down and put our semicolon at the end, because that'll end out our insert query. And let's press enter. And just like we had to type begin, we have to type in. That was the whole purpose of changing our delimiter. So let's type in, then our delimiter that we have currently set, which is the //. So let's go down and press enter. Boom. So that took, and that created our trigger. Now let's change our delimiter back right fast, and we want to change it back to our semicolon. So when we run our following queries, they'll work properly. And so let me show you guys how to show the triggers. So it's a very simple command. All you have to do is type show triggers with an S, put semicolon at the end, and this will show all our triggers right there. As you can see, that is our trigger that we just created. So the employee audit trigger, and it gives you all the information about the actual trigger. And if you have other triggers, they'll be listed here as well. So now let's find some information to update. So let's type select, and let's just select some information from our employees table. So let's type that in, semicolon at the end, press enter, and maybe I should have did it this way. Let's throw in the limits after that. So we could just pull up the top 10 records that will be displayed. So this is an easy way of finding something to update. So let's say we want to update this first line, and it's all based on the department number. Like I said, once you update the department number, it will track that in our audit table. So let's go down and run a update query. So let's type updates and then employee table, and then let's set our department number, because that's what sets off our trigger. So department number, and then let's change the department number to, let's say Georgie Facillo works for the help desk department. So let's go down and throw the help desk ID in there, department number in there. So it's 010, and then close that out. And then now let's do our where clause. So where employee number equals, and let's go down and grab their employee number right fast and drop that in there and put our semicolon at the end. And let's go down there and run our update query. And it looks like we have an issue. Hold on, let's see. And I believe I made a mistake when I created the table. So this is a good way of showing you guys how to alter the table right fast. And let's describe our employees table. And I just want to see what the character is set for. And yeah, it looks like I made the wrong setup for the audit table that we created. And yeah, we could look at that right there just by describing this table as well. So it's our audit table, so employee audits. And let's check this out. And it looks like, yeah, I put the department number as an integer when it should be character 4. So that's the mistake I made. And so I'm glad this actually happened so I can show you guys how to fix issues like this or track them down. Because as you can see, this error, it just kind of gives you information. You know, don't get me wrong, it gives you information, but a lot of times you got to dig. Sometimes the errors are vague and you got to kind of dig through where the issue lies. And so let's alter that table right fast, that employees audit. Let's go right here, just type in the front. So alter table and then employees audits. Let's delete that off. And then let's modify a column. And this is changing the type. So all we have to do is specify that column, which is our department underscore number. And then we can specify what we want to change it to. And so that's why I described this, so I could just type it in, you know, properly. So char and then put 4 right here. And let's put the semicolon at the end and move the mouse out the way so you guys can see, but this will alter our table. And now let's describe it again. And that way we could see the changes. And boom, we are good to go. So let's go down and make our changes in our employees table again. So let's scroll up and let's see where we can find that change. Yeah, this is the change we want to make. So update employees, set department number to D010, where employee number is 10,000. So let's press enter and we shouldn't run into that error. Yeah, we don't. So let's select our employees audit table. So select store from employee underscore audit. So you guys can see the information that's presented to that table. And that lets us know our trigger actually worked. And as you can see, it pulls in the department number, the new department number. And see, this is just a basic understanding or basic concept of setting this up. You can set up triggers that are way more complex. Like for instance, you can track the old data as well as the new data. You can create more columns in here, and that's typically how you'll see it in a production environment. It'll track old and new changes. That way you can correct those changes if need be by looking through the audits. And now let me show you guys a little bit more of this audit log or this trigger in action. Like a while back, I created a query that would go in and randomly insert departments within all of the users within the employees table. And so let's run that again so you guys can see the rows that are inserted throughout this table. And I know it'll populate this audit. There'll be a whole bunch of changes or updates within this table, but I just wanted to show you guys how these triggers actually can be very beneficial. So let's hit paste. Let's paste it in there. And this is something that I wrote a while back, and I'll just break it down for you right fast. But it's basically going to update the employees table. It's going to set the department number to equal. And then we have a nested query. And this is basically select the department number from departments table. And then we ordering it by random. So this is a built-in function. And then we can limit it to 1. And that will do that for every row within the employees table. And so let's go down and press enter and let this run. And then we'll look back at our audit table up here, our employees audit table, once this completes, and we'll see all the, okay, cool. So our update query has ran successfully. As you can see, it made a couple changes, or not a lot of changes. And so let's select our audit table again and press enter. And let's see all the changes. As you can see, it's like 30,000 because it went through every record. You know what I'm saying? And this will keep going as you run updates on that table. So let's say you make a lot of changes depending on the department, it'll list them all here. And that way you could trace back any issues that may have been made in the table unintentionally. All right, so after showing you guys these stored procedures and triggers, I wanted to show you guys another command within MySQL, which is Processlist. And this is essentially like a to-do list for the database server. And it keeps track of all the tasks the server is currently working on. And each task, similar to a operating system, is called a process and can include things things like executing queries, handling connections, or performing updates. And so let me show you guys this command right fast. And it's very simple. All you have to do is type show process list and then semicolon at the end. And this will show you all the processes currently running on the server. As you can see, it breaks everything in columns. So you got your ID, you got your user, you got your host, the database that's associated with that user, so to speak, the commands, the time, state, information about the server. So as you can see, it's pulling in that process right there. Show process list. That's the query that I just ran using my root account. So you can see pretty much any and everything that's going on the server. And I wanted to let you guys know this is an important command to understand because it helps you manage all the processes and then also understand the performance of the server. Okay, so the next thing I want to cover is MySQL dump. And MySQL dump is a built-in utility that's included with MySQL that allows you to make backups of your entire database. And you can also get very specific with it and back up just specific ports of the database as well. And this tool will help you save your data so you can restore it if something goes wrong. Or let's say you need to move the database to a different server that provides more performance for the amount of data that's included in it. Well, this will allow you to do that as well. And so just to kind of cover it, MySQL dumps, it takes all the data and structure of your database and save it into a file. And it's typically a .SQL file. So if you guys remember earlier in the course, I imported that test database. It had the extension of .SQL. So I'm sure they created that test database for others to use using MySQL dump. And so when we get into the examples, I wanted to show you that it's like very super easy to use and you can run it right from the command line. And another thing, you don't have to stop like MySQL in order to create the backup. It'll work while the database is running. And a super cool part about it, it will ensure that your data's integrity is maintained during the backup process. And so let's go through a couple examples right fast. And what I need to do is exit out of MySQL because like I said, it's a separate utility that comes along with MySQL. And so let's go down and back up that employees table with all those changes that we made. So let's go with MySQL dump, and then we have to specify a user in order to connect to our MySQL database, and we want to use our root account, and then we can put -p for our password, and it's similar to how we logged into it. And also, I forgot about this, we have to put sudo in there so we can connect to the database. And now let's do the employees database, and then let's specify the file that we want to name it. So we have to put the right arrow, just like when we import it, we use the left arrow pointing to the left. We need to use the one that points to the right because we're grabbing all the data or the database from within the SQL Server and dumping it to a file. And this is the structure and everything associated with it. It even includes the data that's within the database. And so let's name our file EMP, and then let's go underscore backup, and then it will store it in the current working directory we are in, which is our home directory. So that's fine for now, but you can specify another directory by typing out the full path. We'll just roll with it like this and press enter, and then it'll ask us for our sudo password because we had to type sudo, and then there is no password for our root account. So let's press enter and go down and export or dump our database. And as you can see, it didn't take long at all. And so let's ls our current working directory, and you guys will see the employees backup. And then let's put this in human readable form so you guys can see the size of the actual database file. So it's 176 megabytes. That's how big the actual database is. And let's log back into our database right fast. So sudo MySQL, and then our user, which is root, and then -p for password, press enter, and press enter, no password. And let's go show databases, and semicolon at the end, press enter. That'll show us all our databases. So what I'm gonna do is drop the employees database, and we all remember how to drop a database. And all we have to do is type drop, and then the database, and then the database name. We're gonna drop that employee database, and semicolon at the end, and let's go enter, and that will delete that database. And so let's run the show again right fast, and we'll see that that database is gone. And we're like, oh crap, made a mistake. I did not mean to delete that database. Well, one good thing about this, we created a backup of our database. Now, in order to restore the database, we have to have a database within the MySQL server with that previous name. And so let's go on and create a database. And this will be a empty database. So create database, and then you want to name it the exact same name that it was before. So employees with a comma, press enter. Let's go through and show the databases again. We'll see that we have that database there, but it doesn't have any data or tables or anything in it. We're going to get that from our backup file. So now that we have everything set up, we can exit out of MySQL, and let me show you the command to restore the database. So sudo MySQL, and then we have to put our user in there, so root, and then -p for the password, and then we have to specify that database that we just created, that empty database, because it needs somewhere for it to go. It's not going to just create that database for you. It's just going to modify that current name database that we have in there to represent what we had previously within the backup. So now we just put that left arrow in there, just like we did when we imported before, and then we pull in our employee underscore backup and press enter. It's going to ask us for a password. We don't need a password, and press enter, and I'll go through and import all the database, all the tables and everything within that database, and then we'll verify its backup. Once we complete this, I'll go through and show you guys the tables, that all the tables are restored, and pretty much everything, the data is there as well, by running a couple select queries. So I'll be back when this finishes. All right, and so the import is done. Let's go into MySQL and check our database and just verify that the tables are there, and we can also run a couple queries to see if the data is still there. And so first off, let's show databases, which we know it was there before because we created it before we logged out of the system and imported our SQL file. Now let's type use employee database and press enter, and then now let's show tables and semicolon, press enter. So as you can see, we can tell right off that we have our full database back. So like for instance, I created that audit table for the auditing, so it has a trigger associated with it. So if any updates to the employees table departments column, it will track it within this audit table that we created. So that's a telltale sign that we have our database back, and that's different from the original database that I installed on the system. And actually, let's just run a select on that table right fast so you guys can see that that information is back. And so let's go from employee underscore audit and semicolon, press enter. As you can see, it has all those records there. It hasn't changed, so all our records are back as well. So we can do the exact same thing by checking other tables if we need to, like this is the employees table, and we know from the original database we didn't have this column in here with the department IDs, and so that lets you know that this is the database that we dropped. And there you have it. You have successfully completed my MySQL course, and I hope you've gained a valuable insight into this powerful relational database management system. So whether you're a beginner or already had some experience, I trust that you're now more confident in working with MySQL. And also, MySQL is a fundamental tool for anyone dealing with data, and your newfound knowledge will be an asset in various domains, from web development to data analysts. And remember, the best way to become proficient in MySQL is through practice. And so keep experimenting, building, and refining your skills. With determination and dedication, you can become a master of MySQL. So thanks for choosing my course. I wish you the best of luck in your database endeavors, and may your MySQL journey be filled with success. And of course, keep it techie.